My name is Marvin Rotran. I'm the National Director of the League for Human Rights of B'nai Brith, Canada, and I'll also be your host this evening. And I want to thank everyone who came to be part of this very special call across Saskatchewan, from south to north, from east to west, where the Jewish community in the province has an opportunity to interface with elected officials. I welcome law enforcement members who are with us, and I welcome the community groups who are with us as well. We will be broadcasting tonight on YouTube, as well as hosting on Zoom. There will be a video available on our website after this call, probably tomorrow, worst case scenario on Sunday or Monday. When we planned this call several months ago, we could not anticipate the terrible terrorist attack that led to the murder of over 1,400 people in Israel. A shocking, horrifying atrocity. Worse, or just as bad, we understand that nearly 200 hostages are being held by the Hamas terrorists and their allies. Our thoughts are with Israel and with those who've lost loved ones and with those who are hoping for the safe return of their loved ones held hostage. There was always a lot of interest in this call to begin with, as B'nai Brith tries to strengthen its presence in Western Canada. There's been a Jewish community in Saskatchewan since before the province joined Confederation. And B'nai Brith, in fact, is the oldest Jewish advocacy organization in Canada. Did you know we date from 1875? That's a long time ago. And we've built a presence right through the country. We maintain regional offices in Ontario and Quebec, but we're also present in Winnipeg, in Edmonton and Vancouver. And we have lodges that support us in many provinces, including the B'nai Brith Lodge in Saskatoon. I'd like to call out Mr. David Katesman from Saskatoon, from our lodge, and I want to thank him for the help that he gave me and the good advice that he gave me to aid in the organization of this call. Clearly, the Jewish community in Canada is worried about what is going on in Israel right now. There are people who have lost loved ones, people who know others who have lost loved ones, people who know someone who may have a relative that has been kidnapped and is being held hostage. The situation is very worrisome. Worse, we've seen an upsurge in anti-Semitic incidents in Canada over the last 2 weeks. Incidents on campus, incidents at people's homes. A rabbi's home in Surrey, British Columbia was egged by a vandal. A Jewish student's car in which he was driving was attacked near Carleton University with people ripping off the Israeli flags and yelling at him. Others have been harassed in the street. Clearly, there's a problem, and we are busy at B'nai Brith. Our days are full, returning calls, often just for reassurance. But occasionally, we are there to log what is a real hate incidents and reporting them to police departments across Canada. I want to say I appreciate what the government of Saskatchewan has done. Premier Moe has spoken up. He's condemned the Hamas terrorists and said he stands with Israel. In fact, we're heartened as a Jewish community that politicians right across Canada have spoken up as well. Prime Minister Trudeau has condemned Hamas on a number of occasions, and on Monday in Parliament told the House of Commons that Hamas are not freedom fighters, they're not a resistance, they are terrorists, and they should never be forgiven for the atrocities that they committed. His sentiments were repeated and reflected by opposition leader Pierre Poilievre and third-party leader Jagmeet Singh. Joining Premier Moe have been Premiers Ford, Legault, Eby, Smith, and Houston, with very strong statements in their legislatures. In fact, we're gratified that the government of Quebec has adopted a motion condemning Hamas and standing with Israel, and that the government of Ontario has 2 motions, which will be adopted, I believe, tomorrow or Monday at the latest, in the same vein. Even the Yukon has 2 motions in the legislature. One from Premier Pillay, the other from opposition leader Dixon. Both are very clear, condemning Hamas and standing with Israel. I want to welcome our dignitaries this evening. As some of you were on a moment before we started, the Honorable Bronwyn Eyre, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Saskatchewan, will speak a little bit later. She is stuck in a committee meeting right now, but we just had a text message and an email from her staff. She'll be on the call as soon as she can. So we're going to juggle the scenario that the speakers have to ensure that she gets her turn. I want to welcome the Honorable Lorna Ross, the Minister of Parks, Culture and Sports. And Lorna was the person who released Saskatchewan's endorsement of May as Jewish Heritage Month. And we're looking forward to hearing what she'll have to say. Welcome to Rabbi Claudio Jordakowski, Rabbi Jeremy Parnaz, Rabbi Cates, and Rabbi Simons. The four rabbis in Saskatchewan are all with us this evening. There's a slight change in program. The Honorable Irwin Cotler, our former Justice Minister and outgoing Special Envoy for preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism, cannot make the call. I spoke to him just beforehand for reasons that are quite understandable. His colleague, Noah Liu of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, will be taking the entire block of time that was going to be divided by Irwin Cotler and Noah, a 10-minute block to discuss the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. I also want to note that during the call, two members of Parliament will join us. They are, if they're not already in the call, Robert Kitchen, the MP for Souris Moose Mountain, and Brad Redekop, the MP for Saskatoon West. Mayor Sandra Masters from Regina has sent a video. She was unable to make this call, but she wanted to give greetings, and we've had her video now for well over a week. We also will have Bill Krzyk, a councillor in the town of White City, Jamie Logan, city councillor in Moose Jaw, Sarah Cummings-Truchkowski, a trustee for the Regina Board of Education, and I welcome Superintendent Tanya Grisley from the Saskatoon Police Department. If there are other elected officials on the call, I will get to you as soon as you signal to me in the chat that you're on the particular call. Now, this is a special treat that I have. We are honored to have the ambassador of Israel, Ido Moed, with us for a short period of time, and he'll address us in just a moment. Mr. Moed is recently arrived in Canada, where he replaced the outgoing ambassador, Dr. Ronan Hoffman. I'm sure he did not know at the time that he came to Canada that he would be confronted with a situation such as the one we see now in Israel, and he would have to reassure the Jewish community. He would have to reassure people who have relatives in Israel, and he would have to explain what is going on to the Canadian public and to the Canadian press. Now, we're hoping to adhere more or less to our scenario for the evening so we can have a question and comment period at the end. But I want to thank all the speakers for being here. Before I give it to the next speaker, I want to note the presence on this call of Michael Mostyn, the Chief Executive Officer of B'nai Brith. I can tell you Michael's had a very long day. He's in Toronto. He started very early and he's still at work. It's 9 o'clock back here in the East, and I'll pass it over to Michael Mostyn. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marvin. And I know you've had a long day. All of us have had at B'nai Brith have had more than just a long day. It's been a long few weeks and a very difficult time, I know, for all of us in the community. Honorable ministers, elected officials, Ambassador Moed, honored rabbis, and members of the Saskatchewan community. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here tonight. As Marvin mentioned, this is a very, very difficult time, not only for Israel, but for the entire Jewish community all the way around the world, in Saskatchewan, across Canada. This war was savage in a way that we have never seen before. And so when Israel is saying now that Hamas needs to be destroyed. They're serious, and the world is serious. It is a humanitarian tragedy, what is taking place as well within Gaza. But I think it's very important that all of us understand that this is all the cause of Hamas. Hamas is also causing serious harm to their own people. And we cannot move beyond this without ensuring that Hamas can never hurt anyone ever again the way that they committed these brutal acts. And families are suffering. It's the Jewish community is a very small community. There's only 1 or perhaps 2 degrees of separation from any of us here in Canada knowing someone in Israel that was personally affected. And in fact, it has rebounded. And as Marvin had mentioned, with this anti-Semitism, we often see trends in anti-Semitism growing when we see conflict in the Middle East, but it is particularly acute this time. This time is something different. The hate rallies that we have seen spreading across the country are really unprecedented in terms of the venom, the animosity that we see being pushed forward. People are entitled, of course, to their own political opinions, and you can support whatever politics or you support one country or another, but there can never be any excuse for the incitement of hate, for genocidal slogans that we have seen. The flags of terror groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, these are terrorist organizations as noted by the government of Canada, and yet they are being celebrated on Canadian streets. So B'nai Brith is saying this is not acceptable. If there are gaps in the law, we have to close those gaps in the law. And so we thank all of the elected officials that are on this call, those that have already done so much work in combating anti-Semitism, and there's of course much more work to do, but we are all very worried and nervous about this division, polarization, and aggression against the Jewish community simply for being Jews. It is not acceptable. It can never be acceptable. And there are moments in time with right and wrong, good and evil. And there can be no place for support of terrorism. Unfortunately, we do see that from some segments of society, and we cannot let it stand. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this very important call. And I, together with everyone else, really appreciate all of the speakers and the input you'll have this evening. Thank you. Marvin, back to you.
Thank you, Michael. I want to say I am heartened not only by the big name politicians who have come out in support of the Jewish community and state of Israel, but cities and towns across Canada, school boards are reacting. Even today, 5 or 6 communities from across Canada contacted me to say that they are adopting motions to stand with Israel. I think that's a statement that the Jewish community much appreciates. I'm now going to go to our special guest, Ido Moed, the ambassador of Israel. Ambassador, the Jewish community in Saskatchewan is relatively small. It's been there historically for well over 125 years. It's a community that's proud. There are synagogues in Saskatchewan that date to the beginning of the 20th century. Some of our historians can tell you about Jewish farming communities. So there's a proud Jewish history in Saskatchewan. The province has noted the contributions that Jews have made to the well-being success of the province. And I can tell you your presence here tonight is much appreciated by our guests. Ambassador Moed, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you, B'nai Brith Saskatchewan, for having me here tonight and allowing me the opportunity to speak to everyone. I'm just sorry that it's these under such circumstances that we are meeting and talking about anti-Semitism, because as was noted, we are witnessing one of the darkest periods of Israel, and I think the Jewish people as a whole, since the Holocaust. It's a horrendous shock for Israeli society. The magnitude, the savageness, the way this horrific attack took place, the fact that behind it there is a mechanism that deliberately and systematically went out to kill Jews, to hijack Jews, and to terrorize the whole population in a fashion that is aimed at one thing, and that is to eliminate the presence of Jews on their own land. And so in many ways, this event connects, this horrific attack connects to what we are discussing here today, this evening. And of course, when I came here, I did not anticipate that this will be a topic that we will be discussing, but as it just so happened, I was born in Holland, and both my parents are Holocaust survivors. And so I grew up with the stories of their survival and the way that they arose from the ashes and built a home. And I remember, and I know, and I transfer that also to my children, that when we are saying Am Yisrael Chai, we mean that we are all committed to the continuation of the Jewish people as a strong nation. And when we built Israel, the state of Israel, we meant that this will be the homeland for the Jewish people for eternity. And nowadays, this comes to a test because of the hatred that people nurtured and developed in the past few decades against Israel. Hatred that is based on the most wrong ideas about coexistence, about the very basic tenets of what we see as democracy. And it's not that it's a faraway show. This is something that has to do also with our being in the West, in Israel, or in Europe, or in Canada, because of several reasons. First of all, because we have become multinational, because we have people from all over the world everywhere. We are sort of a picture filled with different groups and peoples living side by side, but some of the groups don't understand that. So when I am asked here in Canada, what do I think about manifestations and support for Palestinian and so on, of course, everybody is entitled to have their own opinions. So there's freedom of speech, but I do think there is no freedom of hate, and that's also against the law. And so as a general principle of democracy, this is something that shows us that something is fundamentally wrong if Hamas terrorists are celebrated in the streets. It means that something is fundamentally wrong, and we are looking at it. And I hear from the few weeks that I'm here that the rise of incidents since the time of the beginning of this horrific attack rose. That means that indeed we have to think about how do we express this value of tolerance in a way that is forceful enough on the one hand, but is still also showing the way for others. Where should they go? B'nai Brith came out with a study recently about school books in the Gaza Strip, or in the Palestinian Authority under the United Nations Relief Agency, UNRWA. And what they came up with is that a lot of these school books, a lot of the text that these school books included was actually incitement to hatred. And I'm sure that many of you saw pictures of small babies in the Gaza Strip dressed as soldiers with guns, and in a way they are brainwashed from day one to hate Jews. And when you look at the outcome and you look at these young babies grew up to be whatever they are and do whatever they did to other human beings just next door because they were Jews, we understand that there is a lot that we have to think about as people who support others, about how do we really want to see our future together with groups that are radical, that are extreme, and so on. I don't have a solution. I'm just saying that we have to be much more aware. My call is a call for action. We have to act now because of this enormous war that was forced on Israel. And I think all societies also should be working more actively right now to combat radicalization, to combat extremism, to combat hate, and to make people understand that that is not tolerated in a Western world, and that there are other ways to communicate with each other. So I think this conference and this meeting is very timely, and I'm sorry I took much of your time, but I think it is important to know that also from Israel's perspective, we look to our friends in Canada to see how they how they relate to phenomena such as hatred and incitement for violence, because this is part of our society also, and this is this should be the way that we want to build our future. So I want to thank you once again for having me, and I wish you all a very successful event. Unfortunately, I have to be offline very soon, but again, thank you, Bnei Brith, for having me tonight. Toda and shalom.
It is us that thank you, Ambassador. I'm sure you're being solicited from everywhere. I'm sure your days are very, very long. As you were quoted in many places in Canada today, there's a very fine line between free speech and hate speech. And we're seeing that, and it's driving these surge in anti-Semitic incidents. We will, on our end, work to log every single incident, and we will work with police departments to intervene. But allow me to say that your words will be taken to heart by the Jewish population in Canada. People are very concerned about what's going on. One thing we all know is no nation can live with a terrorist group next door that kidnaps and kills its citizens on a regular basis and is committed to its destruction. I thank you for having taken the time to be with us. I'm now going to introduce the Honorable Laura Ross, the Minister of Parks, Culture and Sports, who represents Regina Rochdale, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Laura, we have Rabbi Parnes from Beth Jacob here. We have Rabbi Simons from Chabad of Regina. And we have my good friend, Jeff Itkush, who grew up in Regina but doesn't live there anymore. But I suspect still roots for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. So some things never change. Laura, you've been a good friend to the Jewish community in Saskatchewan, and you were the minister that led the work that led to the Jewish Heritage Month being celebrated in Saskatchewan. We're looking forward to working with your government in May to make this a permanent thing year after year. Laura, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me, everyone. Well, as I say, good evening, and let me begin by acknowledging the land where I'm speaking to you from is Treaty 4 territory and the home of the Métis. And on behalf of Premier Scott Moe and the government of Saskatchewan, I would like to recognize the contribution that Jewish Canadians have made to our country, but most of all, our province. And first off, on behalf of our province, I offer my sincere condolences to those who were affected by the unlawful attack on Israel. The Jewish people worldwide facing the aftermath of these tragedies. And at this time, we must show our support for Israel and for all citizens. And in Saskatchewan and Regina here, we are showing our support that we stand with Israel. The Israeli flag hangs in the rotunda of the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly. And that is why our government will be providing $100,000 to the Magen David Adom. This is a member organization of the International Red Cross. Magen David Adom actively raises funds to support Israel's team of trained volunteers and professional medical responders, and aides that are providing the entire nation pre-hospital emergency medical needs, including disaster assistance, ambulance assistance, and blood services. Now in Saskatchewan, there's no room for any hatred, and our government condemns anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism threatens the safety and security of Jewish people around the world. In December 2022, the government of Saskatchewan adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism and continues to work to ensure Saskatchewan is a safe place for all. Adopting the IHRA definition is one step in ensuring our Jewish community feels safe, but most of all, feels heard. Our province's motto says it's best for many people's strength. And that is a principle that is embedded in our history, in our way of life, and our future. By working together, we make our province stronger, prosperous. We create a Saskatchewan where we want to leave to our children and the generations that follow. Now, today's meeting is an opportunity to reflect on Saskatchewan's diversity, rich cultural heritage, and how important it is to learn about each other and support each other. In May, Saskatchewan proudly proclaimed Jewish Heritage Month, recognizing and honoring the legacy and the history of Jewish Canadians across our nation, but most of all, in our province. Jewish people have called Saskatchewan home for more than a century, predating the province joining Confederation in 1905. And early Jewish immigrants helped build our province by establishing farming communities, helping create a life for those who live here today. And we thank our Jewish community for their continued economic, social, cultural, and philanthropic contributions. Now, thank you for allowing us to participate on this very important discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We're very honored to have you here and to have the ear of government. It's good to know that we have a strong ally in the legislature and that, in fact, the entire legislature is aware of our issues. I want to let the audience know B'nai Brith is engaged with Minister Cockrell, the new education minister in Saskatchewan, in an effort to have better Holocaust education. We're urging Saskatchewan to follow what Ontario has done and made Holocaust education mandatory in elementary school. And I note that there are some civil servants from Ministry of Education on the call. I welcome them, and we will continue to engage with the government in the hope that we can find a path to armor our children against Holocaust denial and distortion by better Holocaust education. I want to note that the Honorable Erwin Kotler has actually joined the call. I'm not certain he will speak. When I call Mr. Noah Liu later, Erwin and Noah can decide how they want to divide their 10-minute time. And I'm going to go to our next speaker, Rabbi Claudio Jordakovsky from Agudas Israel in Saskatoon. I thank the rabbi for his good advice. We spoke 3 weeks ago. He gave me some pointers how I could meet more people in Saskatchewan, get them aware of this call. Rabbi Jordakovsky is originally from Chile in South America and has chosen Saskatchewan to be his home. Rabbi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marvin and B'nai Brith Canada, for putting together this important, necessary event and for the good work that B'nai Brith Canada do fighting anti-Semitism, and also for supporting our local B'nai Brith Lodge, who works very hard also in the fight against anti-Semitism. I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis, when we are here to think about how to fight anti-Semitism, discrimination, and racism. I want to acknowledge our Canadian history of persecution and racism and remember that we are committed to engage in acts of reconciliation and what we call tikkun, reparation, as mandated by our Jewish tradition. I feel very privileged to be part of this panel. And I want to begin by saying thank you for the continuous support from our provincial government and the city of Saskatoon, the city council, to our local Jewish community. Immediately after the attacks by Hamas, there were statements, as it was mentioned by our premier, also the head of the opposition, our mayor. The flag of our city hall was raised to half of the pole in honor of the victims of in Israel. And I want to say that as Jews here in Saskatoon, we don't take these statements for granted. And we know that they are a sincere expression of friendship and an understanding of our needs as a Jewish community. We really feel in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan, seen and supported by our provincial and local authorities and we are extremely grateful for this support. So thank you. I was invited to tell you a little bit about myself, about Congregation Agudas Israel. And as Marvin mentioned, I was born in Santiago, Chile. I came to Saskatoon a little more than 11 years ago to a congregation that has a very long history. We believe it's more than 110 years of a strong commitment towards the needs of the local Jewish community. But also, I think there is a historical understanding that being Jewish also carries a responsibility to care for the larger community. In comparison to Jewish communities in larger cities, we are small. I would say that for other provinces, we are a very small Jewish community. Congregation Agudas Israel has a little bit more than 100 families. And we also have, of course, many people who come to events and they participate without being members. And I think we provide all the basic and necessary activities and infrastructure to maintain the Jewish life in the city. We have our synagogue, our community center, we have a beautiful cemetery, our mikveh, we have a Hebrew school, we provide pluralistic Jewish education to our kids twice a week. We have about 30 students. We provide Hebrew classes, Jewish adult education opportunities. Of course, we have Jewish services, social, cultural activities. We have a traditional Israel support campaign that our congregation has been doing for decades ago. And we have a strong commitment with the State of Israel. We are a proud Zionist congregation. And during many, many years, we ran a very successful Shlichim program, which was very important for our congregation. But I also want to say that in addition to the services that we provide to our Jewish community, our congregation and most of our programs are run and led by volunteers. We have a series of important programs that they are created for the non-Jewish community, and they have become very known and respected in our city. We have a very important Holocaust educational program that we run every year. Of course, we stopped during COVID. Until COVID, every year we invited 2,000 students to listen to a Holocaust survivor. In the last years, in order to maximize our space, we developed a beautiful partnership with the Roman Catholic Diocese, and we ran this program in the cathedral, which was a way of showing our students that we are united in fighting racism and against anti-Semitism, and we received the support of the local Roman Catholic leaders, and they spoke beautifully against anti-Semitism, and that's a beautiful partnership, and we are very proud of it. We continue with this, with our educational program. It's more difficult now because our survivors, they are becoming more and more delicate in health, and we are being challenged as all Jewish communities in redefining our Holocaust educational programs. Another incredible activity that we organized was a conversation between a Holocaust survivor and a survivor of residential schools. We also did it in front of 2,000 students. And we wanted to work on the similarities and the experiences of survival and oppression. And that was a very powerful activity for the general community. We have a Saskatchewan Jewish Arts Festival. We opened the doors of our synagogue for a religious service, for activities. We believe that in reaching out to the general community, it's an opportunity for us to show who we are, to invite them to be in relationship with us, and we think that that's a very important part of the fight for anti-Semitism. I also want to mention that, and I apologize, there are members of the synagogue here, and I'm sure that I'm forgetting some activities or projects that we have. I have to mention the incredible work that two important organizations in the Jewish community. They are formally not part of Congregation Agudas Israel, but they are our members who run it, is Hadassah and our local B'nai Brith Lodge. Each of these organizations, they put together every year dinners, the silver plate dinner and the silver spoon dinner, with about 1,000 people in attendance, each of these dinners. And the vast majority of the people who attend are non-Jews, because our Jewish community is very small. And what we do? We raise funds, and we raise funds for local charities and also for our Jewish community. And this is an incredible work in terms of supporting our community. And again, this is an opportunity for us to connect with the non-Jewish community and to show them that we are a community and we are together. And I think the incredible support that we have received from individuals after October 7th, it's a clear representation of all these relationships and connections that our community, B'nai Brith, Hadassah, we have developed through the years. I also think that the work of Congregation Agudas Israel in terms of anti-Semitism is especially focused on education. We, in addition to the Holocaust program, we have permanent connection with the public schools and the Catholic schools in the city. I am permanently invited to schools to teach about Judaism. There are schools that come to our synagogue, and we put a lot of time and effort in doing outreach. And I think that has been a very important part in creating relationships and fighting against anti-Semitism. I want to finish also saying that during the last years, Congregation Agudas Israel, and I'm very, very proud about this, we have become very active in addition to engage in our own activities as Jews, also in connecting with marginalized minorities and creating safe spaces inside our community, but also engaging in initiatives in the bigger community, but representing the Jewish community. For example, during the Syrian refugee crisis, our congregation partnered with the Islamic Association of Saskatchewan, and we sponsored together a Syrian family who came to Saskatoon. We organized this year for the first time a Pride Shabbat, and that made us very, very proud. And we have engaged in educational activities with elders and First Nations leaders to bring awareness and to engage in acts of reconciliation. Coming from different countries and having lived in different contexts, I am happy and proud of living in Saskatoon and Saskatchewan. The Jewish community has excellent relationships with other communities and the community in general. I don't believe that there are active manifestations of anti-Semitism in our province. Sometimes there are, and they have been on the news. I think they are very concerning, but I think in terms of the experience, the daily experience of the Jew, we don't live in fear. And I want to recognize that this is a product of a lot of work that has been put there through the decades by the Jews in Saskatoon. I think there is a lot of work to do. We still see this traditional, latent, passive religious anti-Semitism that frequently comes and we hear about it. And I'm very happy that B'nai Brith Canada is working with our provincial government in trying to bring Holocaust education into our province, so we can start fixing all those elements of anti-Semitism that are still
Thank you very much, Rabbi, for
in our province. Thank
having
you.
addressed us today. I want to let you know that the end of this meeting, just before our comment period, if we have enough time, I'll be showing a portrait of anti-Semitic incidents in Saskatchewan, because we actually track the number of incidents and we can give an overview of what happened in 2022. Thank you for telling us so much about Agudas Israel. You are really, really active, and it's really interesting to hear of your outreach to other communities. I hope you and I can work more closely together going forward. I'm very pleased to have met you and have spoken with you, and I hope it's the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Thank you for speaking this evening. I'll now go to City Councilor Serena Gersher of the City of Saskatoon. I actually know Serena from the time I was a city councilor. We worked together at the Canadian Urban Transport Association, working to get funding to improve public transit in Canada. And in fact, Serena, after I left city council, or at least after I left CUDA, took over the role that I had as board chair of the Transit Board Members Committee. We have many things in common, and I know she works extremely hard in Saskatoon to build dialogue between communities to ensure that the structures of the municipality include the tools necessary to fight against hate and to promote a more inclusive society. Serena, it's your turn.
Thanks so much, Marvin. I've got my timer started here. I wanted to start by acknowledging that I do have a few of my city council colleagues on this call, Councillors Block, Curtin, Goff, and Donauer. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to get to connect with you all this evening from Treaty 6 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis. I was invited this evening to get to talk about the work that the city of Saskatoon is doing to combat hate and racism in our community. But before I start, I did want to acknowledge that many of us are dealing with the grief and fear and sadness in reaction to the loss of civilian lives in Israel, the Gaza Strip, and elsewhere. And the innocent loss of life is deeply disturbing, and I would like to offer my personal heartfelt condolences to the families and communities that are affected. And in the short time that I have with you this evening, I wanted to start by sharing kind of the overarching policy that we have in place at the city, then focus on our operational and education pieces, and end with our enforcement tools. And so right at a high level, embedded in our strategic plan through City Council strategic priority areas are our pillars of reconciliation, equity, diversity, inclusion, as well as community safety and well-being. And our City Council is prioritizing this work to foster meaningful organizational and policy change to help extinguish institutional and systemic racism. And so this acknowledges the systemic discrimination that's experienced by the 2S LGBTQIA+, BIPOC, people with disabilities, and other equity groups, which would include the Jewish community. Furthermore, we also have our cultural diversity and race relations policy that really highlights the need to create an inclusive community where ethnocultural diversity is welcomed and valued, and where everyone can live with dignity to their full potential without facing racism or discrimination. And so while this work has been ongoing for many years, one of the new things that was implemented was developing a reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion department within our city. And so one of the areas that this team is immediately working on is developing effective interventions to dismantle systemic barriers that are specifically tied to our public engagement policy around retention and recruitment for our employees, but also for our boards and committees. And so an example of one of those committees is our longstanding advisory committee, which is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I know part of that past membership actually includes Rabbi Claudio, fellow panelist on this call. And so they provide feedback and guidance to City Council and support education strategies across our community. And I did want to highlight one of the anti-racist education tools the city uses, which we've named I Am the Bridge campaign. And our most recent piece of information was launched this month in partnership with the city of Regina and our professional sports teams across the province to use sport as a mechanism to discuss how to speak out against racism when we see this happening in our community. And so on that note, knowing that it does exist at times in our community, I wanted to highlight that in January 2022, our Saskatoon Police Service created a hate crimes unit. And this unit is responsible for reviewing and investigating complaints that have been reported as being motivated by hate, bias, or prejudice. And so this unit works both on proactive strategies aimed at reducing these motivated crimes, but also focusing on educationship and relationship building within the service and within our community. And I do know we have a member of the service on the call with us this evening as well. And so in just over my 4 minutes here, it's a bit of a brief example of the different ways that as a city and a municipality, we strive to ensure that all of our residents can thrive and feel safe in Saskatoon.
Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to say I'm thrilled to see so many councillors from Saskatoon being present. I've always had great respect for Saskatoon Council. Over the years at FCM and CUDA, I always worked with people from Saskatoon, but I always noted that there was a real desire among Saskatoon councillors to ensure harmony and dialogue among its very diverse population. People often say, well, Saskatchewan's not diverse. Actually, Saskatoon is a very diverse community. Thank you for ensuring that the Jewish community has the ability to have voice through some of the existing committees that give advice to City Council. That's important. And thank you for saying so much in so little time, 4 minutes. I know how difficult it is to do. We're now going to go to a video from Mayor Masters. I want to alert everyone, this video was received on Friday, October the 6th, which is why it doesn't actually make any reference to the events that began on Saturday, October the 7th. Mr. Fuena, would you please play the video of Mayor Masters of Regina?
Hello, I'm Sandra Masters, Mayor of the City of Regina. As home of the Beth Jacob Synagogue, the Herman Jewish Community Center, the Shabbat Center of Regina, and the Bet Zur Fellowship, the City of Regina is a proud supporter of our local Jewish community. You have been an important part of our population throughout Regina and Saskatchewan for over 100 years and continue to contribute to the overall well-being and success of Regina. While the Jewish community may be small in Saskatchewan, it is vibrant and thriving. We value Regina's mosaic of ethnicities and religions and do not tolerate any form of antisemitism or hate for the diverse communities that make up our city. In 2021, Regina City Council approved the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan to improve safety, inclusivity, and well-being for all Regina residents. This multi-year strategy addresses a number of pressure points and social issues that present barriers, such as discrimination to residents in Regina. The City of Regina recognizes May as Jewish Heritage Month, and I would like to personally thank our local Jewish community for their many contributions to our city. We are so much richer for having you. Hello, I'm Sandra Masters, Mayor of the City.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. I have been in contact with Mayor's staff for a number of weeks. We were hoping that she would be able to make the call, but it was doubtful. She has another event. We're now going to go to Rabbi Raphael Katz, the Chabad Jewish Center in Saskatoon. Rabbi Katz, thank you so much always for responding to my emails so quickly. You kept me abreast of what's going on, and we welcome you onto this call.
Thank you so much, Marvin. Thank you so much for reaching out and for having me part of this call. I want to acknowledge all the dear rabbis, community members, elected officials, law enforcement, executives of B'nai Brith. Again, thank you for having me. My name is Rabbi Raphael Katz. I lead the Chabad Jewish Center here in Saskatoon. I was also asked to tell everybody a little bit about what we do. So together with my wife, Sarah, we lead the center. We've been here for just over 12 years. And we have an active synagogue. We have a Hebrew school. We have a mikvah. And we serve Saskatoon and district, as well as northern Saskatchewan, as well as we have a chaplaincy at the regional psych center, as well as the Saskatchewan Penitentiary. I saw a sign or a meme this morning that said, "I'm okay." But if you look closely, the word okay, the letters okay were part of the word broken. Okay was highlighted, broken was in the background. And when I saw that, I feel that it really describes the feelings that a lot of us have. You know, for the purposes of this call, we're all okay. But because of the events of October 7th, we're all really broken. And Marvin, as you mentioned, it's really been heartening to see governments stand up, celebrities, athletes joining together, uniting against what happened, this massacre that happened, this Holocaust level pogrom that happened on October 7th, standing with Israel. It seems that people are finally waking up and seeing what Israel has been trying to tell the world for a very long time, that Hamas is equivalent to ISIS, is equivalent to Al-Qaeda. It's a fundamentalist Islamist group that seeks to really kill Jews worldwide. And unfortunately, it took a massacre for the entire world to wake up. And yet, despite all this, despite the fact that governments, elected officials are standing up, we are seeing protests and rallies in cities in Canada, in Toronto, in Montreal, in New York, in London, supporting the so-called Free Palestine cause. But if you look closely, the people at these rallies are holding swastikas. They're holding, they're shouting, "Gas the Jews," as they did in the Sydney Opera House. Free Palestine from the river to the sea, which is really code word for Israel should be Judenrein, free of Jews, a Nazi term, free of Jews, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. They're calling for the genocide of the Jewish people. And this is 75 years after the Holocaust. And many of us can't believe it's happening again. For an entire week, the world debated if 40 Jewish children were beheaded or just peacefully burned alive. And yet, you know, a hospital was destroyed in Gaza, and right away everybody took Hamas's word for it that it was an Israeli strike. Of course, it was an Islamic Jihad misfired rocket that actually hit not the hospital but hit the parking lot. And so a lot of us are feeling unsafe. We're really unnerved at this idea that if you scratch society just beneath the surface, you'll find a fountain of anti-Semitism. So it's very concerning. It's very disheartening that in 2023 we have to be dealing with this. And I would love to hear from our elected officials what is on their mind, what they're thinking, what can be done to make sure that the Jewish community feels safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Katz. You articulate what a lot of people are thinking and feeling, and a sense of insecurity and unease generalized. Many of the calls coming into B'nai Brith aren't actually complaints or someone calling out an incident or offering evidence, but a feeling that I feel unsafe, and we have to reassure people. Our resources are limited. We do the best we can, but thank you for saying what many are thinking. Happily, Minister Bronwyn Eyre is with us. And I appreciate that she ducked out of a committee meeting in between two sessions to be with us. Minister, I was a former politician. I've done this before on a number of occasions where I had to duck out of a call to go and vote in the council chamber and then come back out to finish my interview or whatever. Minister Eyre is the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Saskatchewan. And she is the person who released the motion where the government of Saskatchewan became the 5th province in Canada to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. And that, I believe, from memory, was on the 19th of December, 2022. Since that time, Newfoundland and Labrador has become the 6th province, and we're hopeful that there'll be others doing the adoption of the definition in the coming months. I would point out that the government of Canada also has adopted the IHRA definition, and that Canada is a member of IHRA as an organization, as are 34 other countries, and 10 are observer states. I'm going to call on Minister Eyre to speak.
Thank you very much. And yes, it's been a rather marathon day. I was in the chamber for 6 or 7 hours, and because it was partly my bill, I couldn't leave. So very honored to join now, and thank you for accommodating me, and to be able to join with B'nai Brith and Jewish leaders from across Saskatchewan, and as I understand it, the country, at this terrible time for Israel and your community. And I know my colleague, Minister Ross, spoke earlier and joined with some remarks, but certainly we both are very pleased and honored to join on behalf of the Premier of Saskatchewan. Clearly, this is more than an important time for such a discussion that we're having this evening about the clear and ever-present dangers and implications of anti-Semitism. And really, in light of where we've been the last couple of weeks, where do we begin? And I'm sure that's a theme that a number of people, all those participating in this call and meeting, will have raised this evening. There are a number of images and of anecdotes that stick in my mind from the horrors of 2 weeks ago, and really beyond 2 weeks ago. One particularly arresting one for me was the image of a lovely young woman who appeared on CTV's Power and Politics, speaking to the host from Israel. And she was beside herself with grief, with woe, with guilt, recounting how she had in effect gone one direction, escaping the scene of the massacre following the rave, and friends of hers had gone another direction and succumbed to capture and worse. Excuse me, there's a floor cleaner behind me, so I hope it's not too loud for everyone. But she said that beautiful girls were being tortured and raped, and she was grief personified. And I will never forget her. I've also read about what came to be known as the Be'eri, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Mother's Emergency Group Chat in a kibbutz, a community next to the Gaza border, that morning of October 7. We have a terrorist on the stairs, call someone, was among the first messages as militants roamed the neighborhood, shooting residents and setting fires to homes. And this was a community used to missiles. But something was different that morning, and usually one member told the BBC, you have an alarm and a boom of the Iron Dome. That's what they were used to, and this time there was no alarm and a sound that they couldn't identify. I read Howard Anglin on the hub.ca, and this article may have appeared other places, but I saw it there. And he wrote last week, quote, perhaps the live streaming of a 21st century pogrom will make our leaders and our media think twice before blithely tossing around words such as racist and hate to describe merely disapproved beliefs. One would hope. Certainly the government of Saskatchewan values and honors the memory of the various Jewish groups who, fleeing persecution in the late 19th century, settled here in our province, even before we officially became a province in 1905. And it's very touching and affecting to think of these brave people who decided to come to this very challenging land and climate. More recently, as referenced, our government has declared May as Jewish Heritage Month, and notably recognized with 35 other countries the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's enumerated definitions of anti-Semitism, the ism, of course, that's behind blaming and demonizing Jews as a collective for why things go wrong. And again, to quote Howard Anglin, who excoriated Western world progressives for, as he put it, quote, having spent so long insisting that words are violence, that they can no longer tell the difference between a microaggression and a massacre. Such ignorance, of course, is very much a part of the scourge of anti-Semitism. So again, and as personally speaking, as a regular contributor to the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, I extend my sincere greetings, salutations to B'nai Brith for organizing this virtual conference on behalf of the Premier of Saskatchewan. Very honored to have been invited. And may Israel soon achieve peace, freedom, and inner harmony. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your very heartfelt words. Unfortunately, some of those images you saw, they're truly horrific. They've scarred all of us. I mean, the young German woman who was kidnapped, raped, murdered, and paraded around the Gaza Strip is just horrible images. I want to thank your government. Minister Ross indicated that the province will donate $100,000 to Magen David Adom. We think that's very generous of the government of Saskatchewan. And thank you again, by the way, for being in and out and coming on to our call and juggling a day, which I'm sure is very, very long for you. As you said, it was your bill and you had to be there. I'm now going to go to Rabbi Jeremy Parnes from Beth Jacob Synagogue in Regina. You may know him, Minister Eyre. I'm sure your paths have crossed. Rabbi Parnes is someone else who chose to live in Saskatchewan because he's originally from England. In fact, I believe he was born about 3 miles from where my wife comes from. So I don't think they ran into each other, but he made a choice to come to Saskatchewan. Rabbi Parnes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marvin. And thank you for what B'nai Brith is doing for this presentation. My thanks and acknowledgement to the distinguished community leaders, fellow rabbis, and others who I know in my community and the community in Saskatoon. I think much has been said. I don't wish to repeat, but I will say this, like Rabbi Claudio, I can be proud of the fact that our community is very active, very vibrant. Many of the programs that are running in Saskatoon are also running in Regina, not all, but many. We certainly do have emphasis with a lot of work in schools, reaching out to other faith communities. We've had dinners with the Children of Abraham, where I've had guests come to the synagogue and invite community from all three faiths to join us, from the indigenous community, and we reach out to them as well. I just got back from spending this morning at what is known as the Tower of God in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, at Notre Dame School, an edifice that was built with 3 walls, each one honoring each faith of the Abrahamic faiths, the Islamic, Christian, and Jewish faiths. and I was there with Prince Turki Al Faisal and with John Boland, the Archbishop of Regina, who Claudio I know is very familiar with. And we talked about interfaith, and we talked about how we work through these things. And we talked about the spoilers in the world, like Hamas. So I'm going to focus slightly differently and speak about a young lady living in Jerusalem right now, studying at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies. She is the granddaughter of one of our members. She is one of my students. We spoke much, and then she decided and agreed that she should go to Israel. She's been studying there for a while. She's one of the Canadians that decided not to come back, but to continue to stay in Israel. And when she heard what was going on, she had to do something. So she went out and took some money and bought food and started to package it for delivery to people who needed it. And she tweeted about it, I guess, to her friends. And the next morning she woke up and there was $3,000 in her account to do some more of that. And now she has a number of volunteers from the Pardes Institute, fellow students who are working with her, and more money is going her way. And one of our members, whose sister I know lives in Jerusalem, has now connected with her, and now they're double teaming to build on what's started. This is the Jewish way, and I want our leaders here in Saskatchewan to know that that's how we function. The idea that when a war starts, more people go to the center in Israel than in other places where they try to go away from. We go to help where we can. And that is happening right now. Unfortunately, in our community, in spite of the strong support of our leaders, Premier Mo, Carla Beck from the opposition, were stood together in my synagogue on Wednesday evening when we held our vigil last week, when Premier Mo announced the monies that were going to Magen David Adom. There was unequivocal support for Israel against this terror. There continues to be. Even Andrew Scheer, who couldn't come, made a point of coming to see me 2 days later in the synagogue just because he felt he needed to be there and offer his support. We feel and appreciate that, but I have to say that the rallies that have been taking place at the legislature, one of which resulted in some injury to some of the members of my community, that's very disturbing and speaks directly to people feeling secure or safe, in this case, not feeling secure or safe. And I invite the members of the legislature, I invite the members of City Council to speak with us and figure out what we can do to address these matters. I will be in a conversation with the Regina Police Service. They contacted me today. They're very concerned as well. But I mean, there's no simple answers, but you need to know that this is happening. You also need to know that we really, really value and appreciate the support that is poured out to us from the local leadership of Saskatchewan. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Like Claudio, I hope to stay in touch with you. Saskatchewan may be a small Jewish community, but it's a vibrant one. B'nai Brith wants to be much more present in Western Canada. Our work isn't just for Eastern Canada. The same needs exist in Western Canada, and we hope to build on the relationships that are growing and flowering, and hope that will allow your shul and your members to know us better and us to know your congregation better as well, and find areas where we can work together. And I thank you for making yourself available this evening. We'll now go to your colleague in Regina, Rabbi Avraham Simons of the Chabad Jewish Center in Regina. Rabbi Simons?
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you for inviting me to join this important call this evening. Appreciate, of course, the presence of all our elected officials, all our community members. During this tremendously difficult and challenging time in Israel, here in Saskatchewan, across the world, meetings like this are so important. When we first moved to Regina and opened the Chabad Jewish Center here 10 years ago, we're thankful to be welcomed by the existing community. My dear friend, Rabbi Parnes, and the existing community welcomed us with open arms and helped us to establish our goals and missions here, which is during these atrocious acts that took place on Simchat Torah a couple weeks ago, we were in the midst of preparing our own celebration of the birth of a new baby boy, which was going to receive his Brit Milah, bringing him into the covenant of Abraham the very next morning. We opened our phones to make some final arrangements, and we saw all the terrible things that were going on. But just as when we were welcomed into Regina, as we established Chabad Jewish Center here, was all through unity, getting together. It's at times like this that we tap into that unity, and it's beautiful to see our entire Saskatchewan Jewish community here on the call getting together. Hopefully we can collaborate on other occasions as well to bring us and unite us all together. We've been through tremendously difficult times in our recent past history, as well as many years ago. And it's precisely in these times that we unite, come together, offer each other strength, and look for the brighter future ahead. Where do we go from here is something which is on all of our minds, and of course, all the support that we have seen and heard on this call, and personal messages that I've received from the general community have been tremendous. But as my colleagues have mentioned as well, the disturbing events that are taking place here in Saskatchewan, even small things that are not in the public. I've had someone tell me this week that their child came home from school telling them that another child told them, my parents said, because you're Jewish, I can't be friends with you anymore. These are things that are very disturbing and remind us of what, when we did a couple of Holocaust speaker events a couple years ago before COVID, and we had over 1,000 people by each event. These are the things that they were telling the public were the beginning of what turned into World War II. However, we come together with strength, courage, and encouraging our members, encouraging the Jewish community here in Regina and Southern Saskatchewan, which we support. I was asked to speak about what Chabad does here in Regina. Some of the things that we do is reaching out to every single Jewish person in Regina and Southern Saskatchewan with tremendous love, compassion, commitment to make sure that every single individual, whether they choose to come to shul, whether they choose to engage, or they just want to be in their own space, make sure they have the opportunity that when they want to engage in some Jewish activity, they know where to find us, encouraging them each in their own space, handing out Passover Shemura Matzah before Passover throughout the entire province, as far as Estevan, Weyburn, Norkton, all the areas near us, and encouraging people at this time. Our enemies want to destroy us, erase us from the face of this earth. We will become prouder, stronger, encourage each other to be prouder. And the way that we become prouder and stronger, of course, there's all the physical acts of safety and security that we need to take. It's also important to recognize that our history is based off of faith and commitment to our Creator, commitment to God Almighty and all of the mitzvot, all the commandments that He gave us, and our belief system and trust in God that it will be okay, we will overcome this. The God of Israel never sleeps nor slumbers. As difficult as it is to appreciate that now, we know that Hashem, God Almighty, is with us, and we take that, encourage all of our brothers and sisters to increase in their Jewish acts, in their personal lives, encouraging men to put on tefillin each day, encouraging Jewish women to light Shabbat candles and bring more light into this world at this challenging time. There's been a tremendous overwhelming outpour of interest in taking on new commitments in Jewish observance here in Regina, and in fact throughout southern Saskatchewan as well. And there's a number of programs that we're instituting in order to encourage that engagement. And we again thank everyone for everything, all of our elected officials, B'nai Brith, for putting this together, my fellow colleagues, rabbis, for everything that we're doing together, and hopefully we'll continue to collaborate on to make sure that Saskatchewan is a place that we can live proud, strong, and continue our committed Jewish life here in Saskatchewan. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. You're quite correct. Those hateful rallies are disturbing. And clearly we've had such rallies with genocidal chants, as Rabbi Katz pointed out, calling for the complete destruction of Israel. We've seen the symbols of banned terrorist groups. We've heard anti-Semitic, words spoken by speakers. But I want to say that the Canadian public isn't there. The overwhelming sentiment in the Canadian public is to stand with Israel. We're truly encouraged by the number of people who have reached out unsolicited to us, politicians, to say, what can I do? And we say, please speak publicly, say something at your council, adopt a motion, talk to the local press, talk to the local community, and make sure that Jewish institutions and Jewish individuals feel safe in their communities, that there's something for you to do. And we're getting wonderful cooperation. So whereas we need to alert the Canadian public that there's a very fine line between free speech and hate speech, as the ambassador said at the beginning in his discourse earlier. Globally, we're seeing people realizing, hey, I should have understood that we're dealing with an unrepentant terrorist group here, and really we're all the better off if they are no longer in existence. So I thank you for that. But I have a question for you and Rabbi Katz. Did either of you study at the Rabbinical College of Canada? Did you?
I did not study there for my rabbinical degree, but before I moved to Regina, I actually spent 5 years in Montreal and was a mentor to students at the Rabbinical College of Canada.
Then you might have run across me, because the Rabbinical College of Canada was smack in the center of the Snowden electoral district that I represented for 39 years on city council. So I may have seen you. Perhaps we never spoke or whatever, but clearly I know most of the leadership of the Rabbinical College. What about you, Rabbi Katz? Did you go to the Rabbinical College either as a student or as a teacher or anything like that?
I did not. I studied in yeshivot and rabbinical seminaries in Israel.
Okay.
Not in Canada.
But we have not run across each other. But the world is small. You never know.
Not yet.
I will now go to our colleagues from the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. We had arranged for Erwin Kotler and Noah Liu to speak. They're both on the call, but Erwin had told me that he didn't feel capable today of speaking. So I'm going to let Erwin and Noah sort this out. If it's Noah, to take the entire 10 minutes, Noah, you can begin now. But if Erwin's going to share part of the time, it could be Erwin. So, gentlemen, give me some guidance. Who is going to speak? Noah, is it you?
I'll let Professor Kotler start us off.
All right, thank you. Erwin, the floor is yours. But before I give you the floor, I want to say a huge thank you on behalf of the entire Jewish community and the Canadian public for the work you did over the last 2 years as Canada's first special envoy for preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. Your work led to the first ever national summit on anti-Semitism, when people suddenly woke up in government that there's an anti-Semitism problem in Canada and began to look at solutions. It was one of the factors that allowed myself and B'nai Brith to convince so many more provinces to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, Saskatchewan being one. So perhaps for the audience, you guys can tell us a little bit more. What is the IHRA definition? Why is it important? How does it help us to better recognize and react to anti-Semitism? Erwin, thank you for your years of service. And of course, you have not only a fantastic record as Canada's former justice minister, you're equally active at the Raoul Wallenberg Center, Human Rights, and recently you convinced Parliament to bestow honorary citizenship for Vladimir Kara-Murza, one of the world's most prominent political prisoner imprisoned in Putin's Russia for speaking the truth. So, Erwin, Noah tells me you're going to start. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Marvin. I'd like to express appreciation to all previous speakers for their important remarks, and to you, Marvin, for organizing yet another timely and I would say urgent forum with respect to the compelling need to combat anti-Semitism. I say urgent because we meet at an important historical inflection moment, a meeting in the shadow of October 7th, the worst day in Jewish history since the Holocaust, of horrors too terrible to be believed, but not too terrible to have happened. As it turned out, my family and myself were in Israel and in Jerusalem on that fateful October 7th. It actually was to be a very festive Jewish Sabbath. It was taking place on the last day of Sukkot, a holiday in which we celebrate our Jewish indigeneity, our Jewish peoplehood, and a holiday in which we celebrate our common humanity. But as we were about to depart to the synagogue where we had celebrated my son's wedding a week earlier, air raids, sirens began, foreshadowing the launching in the next few hours of 500 rockets from Hamas targeting Israeli civilian communities. Let there be no mistake about it. The launching of 500 rockets constitute in international law themselves a crime against humanity. And as we were, as I said, about to depart for the synagogue, we ended up in a bomb shelter where the mass atrocities unfolded in real time. Indeed, Hamas was unfolding in the social media the brutality of their own atrocities. Today, some 2 weeks later, we bear witness to the scale and scope of these mass atrocities, what President Biden has called sheer evil. 1,400 dead, over 4,000 wounded, some badly maimed and may not survive, and over 200 hostages as we meet. And the particular scale and scope of those tragedies reflected in the fact of 270 young people brutally massacred as they attended a peaceful music festival. Massacres at Kibbutz Be'eri, which was mentioned earlier by the Justice Minister, whole families slaughtered, and which include now a missing hostage from that kibbutz, Vivian Silver, an old friend of mine, community activist who spent so much time actually working with Palestinians in the peace movement, just as there are some 5 other Canadians who have been murdered. And we have the unspeakable brutality of what took place at Far Oz. It's hard to describe the horrors of that brutality, amongst which included not only 40 murdered babies, that would be unspeakable enough, but mutilized, beheaded, burned, horrors, as I say, too terrible to be believed, but not too terrible to have happened. And all of this, and with this I close, against the backdrop of a resurgent global anti-Semitism, which has metastasized over the last 2 decades, and which reveals a compelling truth, and therefore to underscore the call to action. And that is that anti-Semitism is not just threatening to Jews. As we've learned only too well, while it begins with Jews, it doesn't end with Jews. Anti-Semitism is toxic to democracies, an assault on our common humanity, the canary in the mineshaft of global evil. And we need, therefore, a whole of government commitment and action to combat it, a whole of society commitment and action to combat it, because Jews alone cannot combat and challenge anti-Semitism. And as I said, it is the canary in the mineshaft of global evil. And with this call to action, I will turn it over to Noah Liu, who's been my special advisor these last 2 years, who has himself been engaged and is a case study of the younger generation's commitment to and engaged in that action. And it is that action by the younger generation, represented and reflected by Noah Liu, that gives me confidence in the future, so that 2023, whatever it may be, is not 1943, and that there is a Jewish state as an antidote to Jewish powerlessness, and that there is a Jewish people that are engaged and mobilized. And there are, as Marvin Rotran said, amongst our own Canadian non-Jewish community at the political level and the civil society level, those that are heeding this call to action. I'll turn it over now to Noah Liu.
Thank you, Professor. That's a very tough act to follow. You spoke wonderfully, and I appreciate you setting the stage as to why this is such an important conversation. And with that, I'm going to move a little bit into discussing how the IHRA definition is an important tool for combating the anti-Semitism, the global resurgence of anti-Semitism that Professor Kotler spoke about. So the first question is why we use and why we look to the IHRA definition in particular. So the IHRA definition is the most authoritative, comprehensive, and international consensus definition of anti-Semitism that exists today. Since 2016, when the definition was finalized, it's been adopted by 42 countries, including Canada, of course. It's received endorsement from the United Nations Secretary General, UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, and the European Union has published a comprehensive handbook on its implementation. Within Canada, it's been adopted by provinces across the country, including, of course, Saskatchewan in 2022, several municipalities, and multiple civil society organizations and educational institutions. It's important to know the background of the definition, which explains why it truly is the best one that we have. And it is the result of a 15-year-long transparent and democratic process, which involved heads of state, parliamentarians, intergovernmental bodies, and academics. And notably, Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Professor Elie Wiesel, a mentor of Professor Kotler's, was a leading inspiration for the definition, and he was a key initiator of the long process that led to its ultimate approval. So with that background on the origins of the definition, I'm going to speak a little bit about what it actually is. So I like to describe the IHRA definition as being comprised of a core definition and a number of illustrative examples. The core definition is broadly worded so as to encompass the many different manifestations and variations of anti-Semitism, past, present, and future. That core definition states, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. So in contrast to that core broad definition, the illustrative examples are much more specific, and they're intended to serve as practical tools for identifying anti-Semitism. And the illustrative examples address both traditional and contemporary forms of anti-Semitism, and I'll quote Professor Kotler himself now. Traditional anti-Semitism is the discrimination against, assault upon, and denial of the rights of Jews to live as equal members in whatever society they inhabit. The new contemporary anti-Semitism is the discrimination against, assault upon, and denial of the rights of Jews and the state of Israel to live as an equal member among the family of nations. What is common to each form of anti-Semitism is discrimination. For examples of traditional anti-Semitism that are included in the definition, you would see stereotypes of Jews as controlling the media, controlling world governments, and controlling the economy. As for more contemporary examples, this would include denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, and this latter one being particularly important at the moment, applying double standards to Israel by requiring of it behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. Over the past week and a half, as many previous speakers have spoken about, we've witnessed countless examples of both traditional and contemporary forms of anti-Semitism in Canada, including the outright glorification of violence against Jews. Now, I want to speak briefly about the fact that there is criticism of the IHRA definition. There are some who claim that it will stifle criticism of the actions of the Israeli government and advocacy for Palestinian human rights, but the reality is almost precisely opposite. The IHRA definition explicitly states that criticism of Israel, similar to that leveled against any other country, cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. So, from the perspective of those advocating for Palestinian human rights, this assertion can actually be seen as ensuring that Jewish and pro-Israel advocates do not zealously overstep and label such criticism of Israel. Whereas conversely, genuine anti-Semitism, such as those examples that I discussed earlier, will be so defined and understood. Ultimately, drawing a line as to what is and is not anti-Semitic serves to foster and promote peaceful dialogue. The IHRA definition helps set parameters for a healthy, democratic, and tolerant debate, thereby facilitating non-hateful communication and preventing both actual instances of anti-Semitism as well as unjust labeling of anti-Semitism. And in doing so, it aligns with core Canadian values of diversity, multiculturalism, human rights, and equality. So now that the definition has been adopted by, as I said, by Canada, by provinces including Saskatchewan, by municipalities and the like, it's important to discuss briefly how we actually implement the definition, which is the next stage following adoption. So I'll start by noting that the definition is non-legally binding, and it's actually intended to be used as an interpretive guide for identifying anti-Semitism. It can and should be used throughout and across society by law enforcement, the judiciary, educational institutions, governments, and in civil society more generally. And in fact, the EU handbook, which I mentioned earlier, explains in detail how each of those sectors of society can practically employ the definition. And the Canadian government has undertaken to publish a similar handbook tailored to the Canadian context. So to conclude, to combat anti-Semitism, the first key step is to define it. And the IHRA definition is the most authoritative, comprehensive, and universal definition of anti-Semitism that exists today. It includes illustrative examples, which address both traditional and contemporary forms of anti-Semitism, helping us to identify it in real life. It aligns with Canadian values of diversity, multiculturalism, human rights, and equality. And finally, with anti-Semitism rising across the country and around the world right now, implementing the IHRA definition, not just adopting it, has never been more important than it is today. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions people may have at the end of the program.
Thank you, Noah, for explaining the IHRA definition. We at B'nai Brith agree it's authoritative. We say it's easy to understand. The illustrative examples make it comprehensible to just about everybody. But as you point out, adoption is only a first objective. Once it's adopted, we need to do something with it. And one of our asks for Minister Eyre going forward will be, how do we move beyond Saskatchewan's adoption of IHRA to making it something that is known to civil servants, to law enforcement, teachers, academia? We want to use the definition as the valid tool that it really is. Thank you again. And I'm not sure we're going to have time for a question period. We're running substantially late, but if you're present, anyone wants your presentation, we'll obtain it from you and we'll redistribute it. So we're going to go to my presentation. I'm going to ask Luca Foina to put my PowerPoint on screen, and we're going to give everyone a view of anti-Semitism in Saskatchewan. So we're going to talk a little bit about the future of IHRA, and we're going to look at anti-Semitism in Saskatchewan. Let's go to the next screen. Well, B'nai Brith is Canada's oldest Jewish advocacy group and first human rights organization. We were founded in 1875. We've traditionally given certain services to the Jewish community: food, security, seniors, housing, sports, cultural events. And we continue to do that, but more and more, we do advocacy to all levels of government. And our main function is actually issuing an audit of anti-Semitic incidents. Next screen. In 1982, we began this annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents. Next screen. And here's what we found in 2022. There were 2,769 recorded incidents in Canada as a whole in 2022. It's a pretty shocking figure. It's the fifth year in a row that there were more than 2,000 incidents. Harassment were nearly 85% of all incidents. That's both in person and online. Almost 8 anti-Semitic incidents a day, of which over 2,000 were online hate. What we saw in 2022, which was particularly disturbing, was an almost 65% increase in incidents in Ontario. Next screen. So this is our numbers for our Prairie region. Alberta is considered a different region, and British Columbia is a different region, but Prairie, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. We had 49 incidents in 2022 in Manitoba, 16 in Saskatchewan. But notice, in Saskatchewan, we had 13 incidents of vandalism against Jewish properties, Jewish institutions, and that's not very acceptable. However, when I mentioned Ontario before, Saskatchewan has 1/14 the population of Ontario. There are over 1,300 anti-Semitic incidents in Ontario in 2022. There were only 16 in Saskatchewan. And even if you multiply that by 14, you'll find it's a far lower figure. And it reflects what Claudio said earlier this evening, that Jewish community doesn't live in fear in Saskatchewan, and that that really isn't very much overt and open anti-Semitism in the province. Next slide. This is our map nationally. You can see the numbers, well, in the north were 0, 0, and 0. Saskatchewan at 16 is one of the lowest in the country. The smaller Atlantic provinces, 0 in Prince Edward Island, only 4 in Nova Scotia. But look at Ontario, they're 1,353. In Quebec, there were 722 incidents. The 2,769 incidents is the second highest we've ever recorded since 1982. 2021 was the highest with 2,799 incidents. There was a 1% decrease. But I want to caution, we don't catch every incident. We work with police departments across the country. Nearly 100 feed us data. And as well, we have a research department. And we also work with municipalities and various bodies of provincial governments that often give us data as well. Next, please. So there is by region. You can see prairies and Nunavut, which includes Saskatchewan and Manitoba, declined from 228 incidents in 2021 to 67. But the anomaly is the number of incidents actually rose in Saskatchewan because we only had 5 in 2021. It was Manitoba that had the largest decline in Canada. I don't know what was going on in Manitoba in 2021, but they had almost a record, or they actually had a record number of incidents. Most places in Canada actually have fewer incidents in 2022 than 2021, except for Ontario, which may skew the entire figure. Next, please. Well, we talked about IHRA, and Noah mentioned there were 35 member states. And if you look at the flags of these states, they represent most of the democracies. By the way, one of B'nai Brith's asked, and we're going to continue to ask for this, is that Canada should endeavor to become the chair of IHRA at some point in the future. It rotates between different states. I mean, Greece had it 2 years ago, then Sweden, Croatia has it now, the United Kingdom will have it. But we're hoping at some point in the future, Canada can, as it once was, be the chair of IHRA. IHRA tends to be Eurocentric. Most of the countries, remember, were in countries where the Holocaust occurred or elsewhere in Europe. There aren't very many member states elsewhere. Australia is one, for example, but there are a few in Asia and elsewhere, and we are advocating for democracies, no matter where they are in the world, to play a part in Holocaust remembrance and fighting anti-Semitism. There are also, let's go to the next slide. There are also 10 countries that are observer or liaison countries. This includes countries like New Zealand, which obviously aren't in Europe, but again, these tend to be smaller countries, except for Brazil, which is a fairly large country, and Turkey. But we're urging those that want to learn about IHRA, not be full members right away, to become observer countries as they transition to IHRA. For everyone in the audience, I want you to know the 2 targets for B'nai Brith, countries we're really pushing to join IHRA, are the Ukraine and the Philippines. The Ukraine, a country where 1 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, which we believe has every reason to be part of IHRA. It would strengthen IHRA. It would strengthen the protection of Holocaust sites. It would also increase knowledge of the Holocaust in Uruguay. And the Philippines, because it is a country that prides itself for its excellent relations with Israel, and for the fact that when Canada slammed its doors on refugees fleeing the Holocaust, the Philippines said, we will take as many as we could. President Quezon was only able to rescue 1,500 because the State Department wouldn't allow him to do more. The Philippines was not yet an independent nation, but a commonwealth. And they did what they could. There is a statue of President Quezon of the Philippines in Rishon LeZion in Israel, recognizing what he did. So we're urging the Philippines to join IHRA. Next, please. IHRA also has many partner organizations: United Nations, UNESCO, the European Agency for Fundamental Rights, the European Union, Council of Europe, Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. These are not exclusive. These are some of the major partner organizations. Next, please. There's the IHRA definition that Noah was speaking about. I'm just going to read it so In fact, hold on a moment. I'm not going to read it because I can't see it on my screen, but the rest of you can. And please take a moment to read the definition. This is the broad basic definition. And we'll now go to the next screen. These are the illustrative examples. What I'm going to ask those who are interested in this presentation is to email me at marvinr, M-A-R-V-I-N-R, at b'naibrith.ca. We'll send you this presentation. But you can look it up on the IHRA website as well. The definition is there, and so are the illustrative examples. Next, please. I think we didn't quite finish the presentation. Lucas, has the PowerPoint crashed? There we go. There's Saskatchewan's adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. There's the press release that was issued on the 19th of December 2022, and it quotes Minister of Justice Bronwyn Eyre, who spoke earlier this evening. There are now 6 provinces that have adopted IHRA: Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador, Ontario, Alberta, Manitoba, and New Brunswick. And we're hoping to have some good news to share with you very shortly. Next, please. There is a press release issued by the government of Ontario in November of 2022. Minister Stephen Lecce is the Minister of Education in that province. And Minister Lecce, after consultation with Jewish groups, including B'nai Brith, did a number of surveys, and he was shocked to find out that 42% of students in Ontario said they had personally witnessed an anti-Semitic incident in school. It's a pretty large figure. He then surveyed further and discovered that 90% of those incidents were in middle school, grades 6 to 9. They then surveyed graduates, and 35% of graduates from Ontario high schools indicated that the Holocaust didn't happen, or that it was exaggerated, or that they were unsure. There was a real lack of knowledge. Minister Lecce said that must change. And he said that Ontario would introduce mandatory Holocaust education in elementary school. He tasked the Ontario College of Teachers to come up with a curriculum and to teach teachers how to teach age-appropriate curriculum to young students of the age of 11, 12, and 13. And Ontario actually has begun to do that. Beginning the 5th of September at the beginning of this school year, Holocaust education became mandatory in Ontario elementary schools. Next, please. The government of Ontario wanted students to have a deeper understanding of the significance of the Holocaust. They wanted them to learn about the experiences of Jewish individuals, families, and communities within Canada. They wanted to learn about the responses of the Canadian government to the Holocaust and the development of Canada's responses to acts of hate and human rights violations after World War II. The minister said it was fundamental. He would do it. He has done it. Next, please. Before I tell you a little bit about our team, I'll let you know that 15 states of the United States also have mandatory Holocaust education. Not all in elementary school, some start in grade 8, but in all 15 jurisdictions, there's been a noticeable decrease in anti-Semitic incidents because of mandatory Holocaust education. Research done by Reality Check Research, and we'll be happy to provide that to everybody after this call. All you need to do is to email me, has shown a 55% decrease in anti-Semitic incidents in states that teach Holocaust education, make it mandatory as early as possible. But what they found really interesting is it was accompanied by a decrease in incidents that targeted Blacks and Asians as well. Teaching the Holocaust not only protects our kids against Holocaust denial and distortion, it also reduces incidents attacking Blacks and Asians. And Minister Lecce has that in hand. His example should be emulated by all the other provinces. I'm pleased to tell you the Northwest Territories is already doing this now too. We're getting good traction with Nova Scotia, and a couple of other provinces have met with us. We met with Premier Smith in Alberta about exactly this, and we've spoken to the minister in Saskatchewan, and we hope to have good news there for next or the year after that about mandatory Holocaust education in elementary school in Saskatchewan. This is our League for Human Rights team, myself as National Director, Mr. Lucas Fuina, researcher and writer who's on this call, and Will Barkley, who is in Ottawa, who is also a researcher and data analyst. Those are our email addresses. I invite the audience to take down our email addresses, mine in particular. Email me if you would like us to send you this presentation as well. We'll send you the video of this call and the research that was done by Reality Check Research on Holocaust education. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for being here. We were going to have a question period, but we are substantially beyond schedule, and some of our audience has signaled that they're going to have to leave. We will probably be organizing more calls in Saskatchewan as we go forward. I want to thank all our speakers in particular for having accepted our invitation to dialogue with us, with the politicians, and with the Jewish community in Saskatchewan. I want to thank the city councillors and town councillors who were with us this evening, MP Brad Redikoff and Robert Kitchen, who dropped in briefly, Minister Eyre and Minister Ross for being with us. And ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a good evening. Let us hope that the situation in Israel will get better. Let us see what we can do to help. I urge everyone to be generous in their donations for those who are in need. Have a very good evening, everybody. This call is now concluded.